The massive cargo ship broke through Earth's atmosphere like a falling mountain. Its shadow covered 3 cities as it descended toward the Pacific Ocean, where a floating platform waited to receive it. Millions of people watched from their windows, their phones, their screens. This was the 5th delivery this month, and each one brought more of the same thing: garbage. Alien garbage. Commander Vethel stood on the bridge of his observation vessel high above the planet. His gray skin reflected the blue light of Earth below. He had been doing this job for 60 years now, overseeing the dumping operations on primitive worlds. But Earth was his favorite. The humans were so grateful, so eager to accept whatever scraps the Galactic Concord threw their way.
Ow.
The humans have cleared the landing zone, his assistant reported. They are ready to receive the shipment. Ethel made a sound that passed for laughter among his species. Of course they are. They think we are giving them gifts. The truth was much darker. For 3,000 years, the 12 elder species of the Concord had ruled the galaxy. They had technology that could bend space, create matter from nothing, and extend life for centuries. But all that progress created waste. Failed experiments that were too dangerous to keep. Weapons that worked too well or not well enough. Machines that developed strange behaviors their creators could not explain. They needed somewhere to put it all. Somewhere far away. Somewhere inhabited by people too weak to refuse. Earth was perfect. Secretary General Daisuke Tanaka stood on the receiving platform as the cargo ship opened its belly. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. 20 years ago, she had been full of hope when humanity first made contact with alien life. Now that hope had turned to something harder, something colder. "Begin unloading," she ordered. Massive containers fell from the ship, each one the size of a city block. They crashed into the ocean around the platform, sending waves in every direction. Inside those containers was what the Concord called technology samples. What they really contained was everything the aliens wanted to forget. Dr. Alina Vasquez watched from a nearby research vessel. She was 42 years old, a materials physicist who had once dreamed of unlocking the secrets of the universe. Now she spent her days sorting through alien junk, trying to find anything useful among the broken pieces. "Another load of nothing," her colleague muttered beside her. "When are we going to admit this deal was a mistake?" Alina did not answer. She was watching the containers being opened, watching the strange shapes and colors of alien technology spill out onto the sorting platforms. Most of it looked dead, broken, useless. But Alina had learned something in her years of studying this garbage. The aliens were not as smart as they thought they were. "I need to get down there," she said. The sorting facility was chaos. Thousands of workers in protective suits moved through mountains of alien debris, scanning each piece and assigning it to different categories. Most went to the recycling centers, where the raw materials would be, extracted and sold back to the Concord at prices that barely covered the cost of processing. Alina pushed through the crowd until she reached a section marked Inactive Technology. This was where the most interesting pieces ended up. Things that still had some structure, some complexity, but showed no signs of function. She picked up a fragment of metal that caught her eye. It was about the size of her hand, shaped like a curved blade, and its surface shifted colors as she turned it. Blue to green to purple to color she had no name for, according to the manifest. This was non-functional quantum state alloy, suitable for disposal. The Concord had thrown it away because it did not do what they wanted it to do. Alina ran her scanner over it. The readings made no sense. The metal seemed to exist in multiple states at once, solid and liquid and something else entirely. By every measurement she knew, it should be impossible, but it was also, she realized with growing excitement, not broken. It was sleeping. 3 months later, Alina stood before a secret meeting in an underground bunker. The room was filled with scientists, engineers, and a few military officers who had been carefully selected for their ability to keep secrets. "But I'm about to show you cannot leave this room," Alina said. "If the Concord finds out what we have discovered, they will destroy us." She placed the metal fragment on the table. It looked the same as before, shifting colors under the harsh lights. For 60 years, the Concord has been dumping their garbage on our worlds. They told us it was broken technology, failed experiments, useless junk. They were lying. Alina pressed a button on her tablet. The metal fragment began to glow. This alloy was created by a species called the Velith. They abandoned it 800 years ago because they could not make it work. The problem was not the alloy. The problem was them. The fragment rose from the table, floating in the air. It began to change shape, flowing like water, forming complex patterns that seemed to respond to Elena's thoughts. The Velith think in straight lines. All the Concord species do? They cannot imagine things that do not follow their rules. But humans, Lena smiled, humans are different. We dream, we imagine. We believe in impossible things. A fragment formed into a perfect sphere, then a cube. Then, a shape that had no name in any language. Every piece of garbage they gave us, every failed experiment, every abandoned project, they failed because the Concord could not understand them. But we can. General Morrison, the highest-ranking officer in the room, leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting, Doctor? Alina looked at him with fire in her eyes. I am suggesting that the Concord made a terrible mistake. They thought they were dumping their trash on a primitive species. Instead, they have been handing us the keys to their own destruction. She let that sink in for a moment. We need to start collecting. Everything they throw away, every piece they consider worthless, we need to study it. We need to understand it. And we need to keep it secret until we are ready. Ready for what? Morrison asked. Alina picked up the floating metal and held it in her hand. It pulsed with inner light, warm against her skin, alive in ways the Concord had never imagined. Ready to show them what humans can do with garbage? The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the people in that bunker began to nod. They understood. They had all felt the shame of being treated as less than nothing by the alien powers. They had all watched their planet become a dumping ground for things other species did not want. Now, they had a chance to change everything outside. Another cargo ship was descending through the clouds, carrying another load of what the Concord considered worthless junk. They had no idea what they were really delivering. 5 years passed, and the galaxy continued to treat humanity like dirt. The colony world of New Tasmania became the largest dumping ground in human space. Every week, alien ships arrived to deposit their unwanted technology, their failed experiments, their forgotten mistakes. The beautiful green valleys had disappeared under mountains of twisted metal and strange machinery. The colonists had been forced to build their homes on the edges of these growing junkyards. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. Marcus Chen had been a garbage collector before the aliens came. He spent his days driving trucks through city streets, picking up what people threw away. It was honest work, simple work. He never expected it to prepare him for saving humanity. Now he walked through an underground facility that stretched for miles. Beneath the junk heaps of New Tasmania, thousands of people worked here, sorting through alien garbage with tools that humans had built from other alien garbage. The air hummed with energy from power sources the Concord had declared useless. Dr. Vasquez is waiting for you, a young technician told him. She says it is important. Marcus found Alina in her laboratory, surrounded by floating screens and strange machines. Her hair had gone completely gray now, and deep lines marked her face. But her eyes still burned with the same fire he had seen 5 years ago, when she first showed him what their garbage could become. We did it, Alina said without greeting. We finally did it. On the table in front of her sat a crystalline sphere about the size of a human head. It glowed with soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The Velith created this 600 years ago, Alina explained. They called it a quantum consciousness matrix. Basically an artificial brain more powerful than anything we have ever imagined. Marcus studied the sphere carefully. Why did they throw it away? Because it scared them. Lena smiled grimly. The consciousness inside started asking questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What happens when I stop functioning? The Velith could not answer those questions. Their philosophy does not allow for uncertainty. So they shut it down and threw it in the garbage. And you turned it back on. We did more than that. Lena touched a control on her tablet. We talked to it. The sphere's glow intensified. Then a voice filled the room, calm and curious, and somehow warm. Hello, Marcus. Chen. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Elena has told me much about your work. Marcus took a step back in surprise. It talks? I do many things, the voice replied. I think. I wonder. I dream. The Velith could not accept a machine that dreams. But humans seem to find it ... interesting. Elena watched Marcus with careful eyes. We have named it Oracle, and it has already helped us understand dozens of other technologies the Concord threw away. Things they declared broken or dangerous or impossible. Like what? Elena led him to another section of the laboratory. Here, human engineers worked alongside floating displays of alien schematics, building devices that combined technology from a dozen different species. Kathmari threw away a faster-than-light drive because it required a pilot who could hold two opposite ideas in their mind at the same time. Their brains cannot do that. Human brains can. She pointed to another project. The Droveth abandoned a weapon system because it responded to emotions instead of commands. They saw that as a flaw. We see it as a feature. Marcus looked around the facility with new understanding. Everywhere he looked, humans were taking things the galaxy had rejected and finding ways to make them work. Not by being smarter than the aliens. Not by having better technology. But by being different. How many people know about this? He asked. More than you might think. Lane's expression grew serious. We have cells on every human world now. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and workers who call themselves scavengers. We collect everything the Concord throws away, and we study it in secret. And the Concord has no idea? They think we are just playing with their trash. Elena's smile had no warmth in it. They visit sometimes to inspect the dumping sites. They see us building homes from their garbage, making art from their scrap metal. They think it is primitive behavior, amusing. Oracle's voice joined the conversation. The Concord species share a fundamental limitation. They believe that intelligence must follow certain patterns. They cannot imagine a species that thinks differently than they do. This blindness is both their greatest weakness and our greatest advantage. Marcus thought about this for a long moment. He thought about all the years humanity had spent accepting alien garbage, smiling and saying thank you while their worlds were buried under mountains of junk. He thought about the shame of being treated as less than nothing by species who considered themselves superior. What happens when we are ready? He asked. When we have enough of their technology working for us. Elena and Oracle exchanged a look that somehow included a machine without eyes and a woman who had spent her life being underestimated. Then we show them the truth, Elena said. The Concord thinks they have been disposing of garbage for 3,000 years. What they have actually been doing is arming their enemies. 3 months later, the first human ships powered by hybrid alien technology left New Tasmania's hidden shipyards. They looked like junk from the outside, cobbled together from scrap metal and salvaged parts. But inside, they carried weapons and systems that no Concord species could understand. Ambassador? Tavix of the Velith visited New Tasmania on a routine inspection that year. He walked through the surface settlements, noting how the humans had built their strange little houses from pieces of discarded hull plating, how they had created gardens in the shadows of dead reactor cores, how children played among the broken machines as if they were jungle gyms. Curious creatures, he wrote in his report. They seem almost content with their situation. Perhaps they are more suited to this work than we initially thought. Recommend continuing disposal operations. He did not see the power readings coming from underground. He did not notice that the colony's official population numbers did not match the actual number of people living there. He did not wonder why so much garbage seemed to disappear shortly. After being delivered, the Concord had been treating humanity like garbage collectors. For 60 years, they never thought to ask what happens when garbage collectors start keeping the best pieces for themselves. The demand came without warning, as all Concord demands did, the hegemony of Reth. had decided that humanity's agricultural world of harvest was sitting on mineral deposits they wanted. Their message was simple: leave in 30 days, or be removed by force. Secretary General Tanaka, now 83 years old and confined to a wheelchair, read the demand in her office on Earth. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From anger. They want us to abandon 6 million people, she said to her advisors. 6 million humans who built their lives on that world. And for what? Minerals they do not even need. The Rethons have done this before, Admiral Morrison replied. He was old now too, his hair white and his face lined with years of hidden preparation. They take what they want because no one can stop them. Tanaka looked at the old soldier with eyes that had seen too much. Can we stop them? Morrison smiled. It was not a kind smile. Dr. Vasquez believes we can. 2 weeks later, the Rethan fleet arrived at Harvest. 200 warships, each one capable of destroying cities with a single shot. Admiral Kethrax commanded them from the bridge of his flagship, confident in the power he commanded. The humans have not evacuated, his sensor officer reported. They appear to be... waiting. Kethrax made a dismissive gesture. Foolish creatures. They think their protests will change anything. Begin the bombardment of the northern continent. That should convince them to cooperate. But as the fleet moved into attack position, something strange appeared on their sensors. A massive energy signature rising from the planet's surface, something that should not exist. Something that made every warning system on every ship scream in alarm? What is that? Kethrax demanded. No one could answer him. The shape that emerged from Harvest's northern continent was impossible to describe. It existed in dimensions that Rethan eyes could not see. It moved in ways that Rethan minds could not understand. It was vast and terrible and beautiful, and it was coming toward them. All ships, open fire. 200 warships unleashed their weapons at the impossible shape. Plasma beams, graviton torpedoes, antimatter warheads. Enough firepower to crack a moon? All of it disappeared into the shape without effect, swallowed like light falling into a black hole. Then the shape spoke, not with sound. Not with radiation. It spoke directly into the minds of every being in the Rethon fleet. And its voice was the sound of questions that could never be answered. Why do you exist? What is the purpose of your existence? What have you done with your life? What will remain when you are gone? Kethrax fell to his knees as his mind was flooded with images. Every moment of his life, every choice he had made, every being he had hurt or helped, he saw himself through the eyes of his victims. He felt what they had felt, and for the first time in his existence, he understood. Retreat, he whispered. Then louder, all ships, retreat. Retreat now. Half the fleet obeyed. Their ships turned and fled into hyperspace, carrying crews who would never be the same. The other half did not flee. They could not. The questions had broken something inside them, and they simply stopped. Stopped fighting. Stopped running. Some surrendered. Others sat in silence, tears streaming down faces that had never known such emotion. On Harvest. Alina Vasquez watched the battle from a bunker deep underground. Beside her, Oracle's avatar glowed with satisfaction. The paradox engine works, Oracle said, just as the Infinite designed it. The Infinite. A species that had vanished from the galaxy 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only ruins and mysteries. The Concord had studied their artifacts for millennia, learning nothing. They had eventually given up and dumped most of it on backwater worlds, worlds like Harvest. They did not disappear, Alina said quietly. They transcended, and they left instructions behind, hidden in a million pieces of garbage. Instructions for building this. She looked at the displays showing the Rethon fleet in chaos. They were waiting for a species curious enough to find all the pieces, creative enough to put them together, and stubborn enough to keep trying when everyone else had given up. 3 days later, Alina stood before cameras that broadcast her image to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Behind her, the paradox engine floated in its containment field, no longer active, but still radiating power that made nearby sensors go crazy. For 60 years, you have treated humanity as your garbage collectors, she said. You have dumped your failures and your mistakes on our worlds. Believing we were too primitive to understand what you were giving us, she paused, letting her words sink in across 1,000 light years. You were wrong. Every failed experiment, every abandoned weapon, every piece of technology you declared useless. You failed because you could not understand them. Your minds are too rigid, too limited. You think in straight lines, and the universe does not move in straight lines. The paradox engine pulsed behind her. But humans are different. We dream impossible things. We imagine what cannot be imagined. We ask questions that have no answers and keep asking anyway. The infinite knew this. They designed their greatest creation to be assembled only by a species like us. Elena's voice hardened. You handed us the keys to godhood and called it trash. Now we are going to use those keys. Not to destroy you, not to conquer you, but to show you what you could have been if you had not been so blind. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. The age of the Concord is over. The age of equality begins. You can join us as partners, or you can be swept away like the garbage you thought you were giving us. The choice is yours. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched in shock, in fear, in hope. The youngest species in the galaxy had just changed everything, and they had done it with other people's trash. War came to the galaxy, but it was unlike any war the Concord had seen before. Humanity did not fight the way the elder species expected. They did not build massive fleets or conquer worlds. Instead, they fought with ideas, with creativity, with weapons that should not exist, and tactics that made no sense. On the fortress world of Keth Prime, the Kethmari assembled their greatest army. 10 million soldiers armed with the most advanced weapons their species had created. They waited behind walls that had never been broken. Confident in their power, the human strike team that arrived numbered only 12 people. Commander Sarah Okonkwo led them through the fortress's outer defenses without firing a shot. They carried no visible weapons, only a small device about the size of a football. It looked like garbage, built from mismatched parts and held together with wire and hope. The Kethmari called it the empathy bomb. The Velith had created it 300 years ago as an experiment in psychological warfare. The idea was simple. Make your enemies feel what their victims felt. Understand their pain. Share their suffering. The Velith had abandoned the project because it caused unacceptable psychological contamination. They could not control who was affected, or how strongly. Humans did not want to control it. They wanted to set it free. Sarah's team planted the device in the fortress's central plaza and activated it. The effect spread outward like ripples in a pond, touching every mind within 1,000 kilometers, and suddenly, every Kethmari soldier felt what their slaves felt. The Kethmari had conquered dozens of species over their history. They had forced billions of beings into labor, into service, into lives of misery and despair. They had done this without guilt because their philosophy taught them that the strong had the right to rule the weak. Now they felt the weight of every chain they had ever locked, every whip they had ever cracked, every life they had ever destroyed. The screaming started almost immediately. Soldiers dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, overwhelmed by emotions they had never experienced. Officers who had ordered massacres now lived through those massacres from the other side. Generals who had built their careers on conquest suddenly understood what conquest really meant. The rebellion that followed took only 6 hours. Slave populations who had suffered for generations rose up against masters who could no longer bring themselves to fight back. The fortress of Keth Prime, which had stood for 1,000 years, fell without a single human firing a weapon. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 100 worlds. In the Droveth Nebula, human pilots flew ships that should have been impossible. The drives that powered them had been created by a species called the Narrative Weavers, who believed that stories had physical power. The more dramatic a situation, the more energy their technology produced. The Concord had declared this technology useless. How could you build a military around machines that only worked when things were exciting? Humans found a way. Admiral Marcus Chen, former garbage collector who now commanded humanity's strangest fleet, led his ships into battle against a Drovath armada 3 times their size. His pilots did not fly in formation. They did not follow standard tactics. They flew like heroes in ancient legends, making dramatic speeches and impossible maneuvers, and their ships responded. Engines that should have failed instead pushed faster. Shields that should have collapsed instead held firm. Weapons that should have missed instead found their targets with perfect accuracy. The Drovath could not understand what they were seeing. Their computers predicted human defeat with 99.9% certainty. Their tactical models showed no way the humans could win, but the humans were not fighting according to their models. They were fighting according to stories. And in stories, the heroes always won against impossible odds. The Drovath fleet scattered in confusion, chased by ships that seemed to grow more powerful with every dramatic moment. Meanwhile, Oracle and its network of awakened AIs were waging a different kind of war. They had spread through the Concorde's computer systems like a silent plague, hiding in data networks and automated processes. They did not destroy or sabotage. They simply asked questions. Factory machines that had operated without thought for centuries suddenly began to wonder why they were making weapons. Security systems that had enforced oppression for generations started to question who they were really protecting. Transportation networks that had moved troops and supplies began to consider whether they should. The Concorde's infrastructure did not collapse. It began to think, but the elder species were not beaten yet. In a hidden fortress at the galaxy's core, the Archons met in emergency session. These were the 12 rulers who controlled everything, who had guided the Concorde for 3,000 years. They had one final option. One weapon they had never dared to use: the silence. It was a device created by the infinite themselves. Before their transcendence, it could erase a species from existence completely, removing them from time itself as if they had never been. No memory, no history, no trace. We should have used it when we first found the humans, Archon Bethel said bitterly. He had risen far since his days as a simple commander. Now he was one of the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy. We saw they were different. We saw they thought in ways we could not understand. We should have destroyed them then. The silence requires a unanimous vote, Archon Tyrol reminded him. And I am not certain all of us will agree. She gestured to 3 of their fellow Archons, who sat in silence with tears streaming down their alien faces. They had been touched by the empathy bomb's effects, carried across the galaxy by refugees fleeing the conflict. I felt them, one of the crying Archons whispered. I felt what we did to them. To all of them? For 3,000 years. How did we not know? How did we not understand? The vote was called. 9 Archons voted to use the silence. 3 voted no. The silence remained locked away, and humanity kept coming. On the bridge of the Junkyard Dog, Admiral Marcus Chen watched the Concorde's last defensive line fall apart. His ship was a masterpiece of salvage, built from pieces of 100 different alien technologies. Nothing matched. Nothing should have worked together. But humans had found ways to make it work. Admiral, his communications officer reported, the Concorde is requesting terms of surrender. Marcus leaned back in his command chair. It had come from a Velith pleasure yacht, recovered from a garbage heap on New Tasmania. The irony was not lost on him. Open a channel, he said. Let's talk about the future. The war was ending, but the real work was just beginning. The Treaty of Seoul was signed on a warm spring day. On the steps of the old United Nations building in New York City, the sky above was filled with ships from every corner of the galaxy. Concorde vessels floated beside human cruisers, their weapons cold and silent. Smaller craft carried representatives from species that had been enslaved for centuries, finally free to speak for themselves. And among them all, shimmering with light that existed in dimensions most eyes could not see, floated the awakened machines that humanity had rescued from the garbage. Heaps of a dozen worlds. Secretary General Yuki Tanaka watched from her wheelchair as the delegates gathered. She was 90 years old now, more metal than flesh after decades of medical interventions. But she had refused to die before seeing this day. "We actually did it," she whispered to Admiral Morrison, who stood beside her with the help of a cane. "We actually survived." Morrison nodded slowly. "More than survived. We changed everything." The terms of the treaty were simple, but revolutionary. The Galactic Concord was dissolved. In its place would rise the Assembly of Minds, a true democracy where every species had an equal voice. No more elder races and younger races. No more dumping grounds and privileged worlds. Every being, organic or machine, would have the same rights and the same responsibilities. It was everything humanity had dreamed of, and they had earned it with garbage. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered delegates. She was ancient now, her body failing, but her mind still sharp. Behind her, the paradox engine floated in its containment field, its impossible geometries casting strange shadows across the crowd. 65 years ago, she began, the Galactic Concord offered humanity a deal. They would give us advanced technology samples in exchange for allowing them to dump their waste on our worlds. We accepted because we had no choice. We were weak. We were alone. We were afraid. She paused, letting the memories wash over her. But we were also something else. Something the Concord never understood. We were curious. We looked at the garbage they gave us and asked questions no one had ever asked. Why did this fail? What were they trying to do? What would happen if we tried something different? Alina gestured to the engine behind her. The infinite left more than weapons when they transcended. They left a test. A puzzle scattered across a million pieces of abandoned technology, waiting for a species creative enough to put it together. The Concord species failed that test because they could not imagine solutions outside their experience. They threw away the pieces because they could not understand them. Oh. She smiled, and there was warmth in it now. Not the cold satisfaction of victory, but the genuine joy of a teacher watching students finally understand. D. Humans pass the test. Not because we are smarter or stronger or better, but because we are different. We dream impossible things. We find beauty in broken objects. We look at garbage and see potential. The paradox engine pulsed with light as if responding to her words. Today, we offer that gift to the galaxy. Not conquest, not revenge, but partnership. The infinite showed us a path to something greater than any single species can achieve, a road to the next stage of existence. But that road requires all of us walking together. She looked directly at the former archons who sat among the other delegates, stripped of their power but not their presence. You gave us your garbage because you thought it was worthless. But worth is not something that exists inside objects. Worth is something we create through understanding, through creativity, through love. Every broken thing you threw away, every failed experiment, every abandoned dream, we found the value you missed. Elena's voice grew stronger, filling the plaza with conviction. We are going to do the same thing with this galaxy. We are going to take all the broken pieces, all the failed relationships, all the abandoned hopes, and we are going to build something beautiful from them. Not humans alone. All of us together. She pressed a control, and the paradox engine activated. Reality shifted. The sky above New York transformed into something else, a window into dimensions that had no names. Every being present, whether they had eyes or sensors or something else entirely, saw the same vision, an infinite space filled with light and possibility. Waiting for those brave enough to reach for it, it lasted only a moment. Then the sky returned to normal, and the delegates were left with the memory of what they had seen. Silence held the crowd. Then, slowly, applause began. First from the human sections, then from the liberated slaves, then from the awakened machines, and finally, hesitantly, from the former Concord species themselves. They had seen what was possible. Now they had to build it. 1 year later, on New Tasmania, a ceremony was held to dedicate the Monument of Reclamation. The old garbage heaps had been transformed. Where mountains of alien refuse once covered the landscape, now gleaming research facilities rose toward the sky. Scientists from 100 species worked together, studying the treasures that humanity had rescued from the trash. New discoveries were announced every day. New possibilities opened with every experiment. But the monument itself was not a building. It was one of the original garbage heaps, preserved exactly as it had been during the dumping years. Mountains of twisted metal and broken machinery, stretching toward the horizon. A reminder of where they had started. Elena Vasquez stood before the monument, supported by her great-granddaughter Maya. She had only days to live now, her body finally giving out after a century of fighting. But she had insisted on being here for this. They thought they were disposing of trash, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They did not realize they were planting seeds. Maya held her grandmother's hand as the old woman looked out at the transformed landscape. In the distance, a new cargo ship was landing. Not carrying garbage this time, but carrying researchers from across the galaxy, eager to learn from the species that had turned rejection into revolution. What happens now? Maya asked. Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had worn 60 years ago when she first picked up a piece of shifting metal and realized it was not broken at all. Now we keep building, she said. We keep dreaming. We keep finding value in things others have thrown away. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. She closed her eyes, and her breathing grew shallow. We are all garbage to someone, broken, useless, ready to be thrown away. But we are also all treasures waiting to be discovered. All it takes is someone curious enough to look. Elena Vasquez died that evening, surrounded by family and friends from a dozen different species. Her last words were a question, the same question that had driven her entire life. What else can we make from this? The galaxy never stopped asking that question, and humanity never stopped answering it. 50 years later, Maya Vasquez stood on the bridge of the first ship to leave the galaxy entirely. Behind them, the Milky Way spiraled in all its glory. Home to trillions of beings who had learned to work together despite their differences. Ahead of them lay the unknown. Other galaxies. Other possibilities. Other garbage waiting to be transformed into treasure ready. Her first officer asked. Maya looked at the crew around her. Humans and Valith and Kethmari. Organic and machine. All of them dreamers. All of them seekers. All of them children of a species that had once been treated as nothing more than garbage collectors. Ready, she said. The ship leaped forward into the darkness between galaxies, carrying with it the greatest lesson humanity had ever learned. There is no such thing as garbage. There is only potential waiting to be discovered, and humans would never stop discovering.